Guitar Business Radio is the podcast for the business of guitar, where you'll always get no reviews, no demos, and no idle chatter. From players to CEOs and in between. If you have a professional or business connection to the world of guitar, this show is your window to insight and information you won't get anywhere else. I'm Jeffrey D. Brown, and I approve this message. So let's get to it. From Guitar Business Media, welcome to the 43rd episode of GBR, where we take nothing for granted and fully understand that you can choose to spend your precious time doing like a billion other things, and we greatly appreciate every minute you decide to spend with us. Of course, we hope it's more than a minute. Many minutes would be terrific, but whatever it is, thanks for joining us today, or tomorrow, day or night, doesn't matter. That's the beauty of this medium. It's on demand, and you should demand the best for your time. So with that, I think you'll get a lot out of our show today, as we're joined for nearly the full hour by Chris Martin. Many, if not most of you, are familiar with that name. How could you not be? He's the CEO of CF Martin & Company. It's not a small business anymore. It hasn't been for quite a while, but family run it has been for about 185 years. We have quite a candid and wide-ranging interview with Chris, covering a lot of topics about the business of Martin that you've probably not heard before, so we'll be getting to that momentarily, if not sooner. Now, some of you may have already noticed, but for the rest of you who have not visited the GBR website or our social media pages lately, everything looks different. That's because we decided to go ahead and introduce GBR 2019 a bit early. It was something that was originally planned for early next year to coincide with our 50th episode, but one thing led to another, and so here we are. We have a whole new look and feel, new logo, new episode graphics. We even went back and retrofitted all the previous episodes with the new scheme, which was quite a job, but it had to be done. I'm big on consistency, so check it out if you haven't, and let us know what you think. And even though I'm constantly saying this show is and always will be a work in process, we will not be changing the look and feel of GBR for quite a while now. Also, a reminder, like I mentioned last week, we have a great holiday special show coming up later this month that should be a lot of fun, and we'll have many of our previous guests on with us, and maybe a few new ones. In fact, I was thinking it might also be fun to add a few of our listeners to the show as well. What do you think? Would you like to add your voice to the GBR holiday show? It may be possible. If so, reach out and contact us on our website at guitarbusinessradio.com from our contact page. There's a lot of different ways to get in touch. If it looks like we can do something, we'll get in touch ASAP, but you have to make the first move. And while we're waiting very patiently for you to do that, I think it's time for us to move on to something completely different. Well, Chris Martin is the CEO of CF Martin & Company. That's a lot of C's. He's been in that position for a long time, and he's been part of the rich family history of this iconic company that's been building extraordinary guitars for the last 185 years or so. There's so much to talk about that I'm not even sure where to begin, but I guess we'll have to start somewhere. So let's just get to it as Chris Martin joins us right here and right now. Well, Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show with us today, and welcome to GBR.
Thanks, Jeff.
Great. You know, we always start off here with some historical significance, but there is so much significant history with you and the company and your family that, you know, it's kind of hard to know quite where to begin, considering the time constraints that we have. So,
right. I mean, that in and of itself is an hour or two.
I know. So I think if it's okay, what I'm just going to do is ask you to tell us what you consider to be some of the most important and impactful events in the earlier part of your life that, have contributed to where you are today.
So should I actually go back to the earlier part of my family's life? Because without that, I'm kind of chopped liver.
It's your mic. You're on.
Because I have to admit, my parents were divorced, so I didn't grow up, thinking or knowing that I would be destined to go into the family business. But as I got older and became more exposed to it, It really was compelling to me. And I remember the first time I ever got to go visit Scott Chinnery in New Jersey. And anybody that remembers Scott, he was very generous, had been successful, and decided to become a world-class guitar collector. And ultimately, unfortunately, he passed away way too young, but he was going to then open a museum. And so he was amassing this collection of vintage guitars.
I remember.
and I got to go, because someone said, Chris, you've got to go down and see Scott's old Martins. So Scott's like, yeah, come on down and bring some of your colleagues. So one quick funny story, we're in Scott's den, and he had these beautiful glass cases, and I'm eyeing up the old, Stauffer-style Martins. And this may have been the second time I was there. And I said, Scott, tell my colleagues, my friends that I brought from the factory, how many guitars do you own? And he looks around the den, and he goes, oh, well, here in my den, I probably have about 600. And, of course, there's this audible gasp from everyone in the room, even though they're kind of looking around going, now that I look around the room, he probably does. And then he said, and in the basement, 2,000 more.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. And I never got to see the ones in the basement. But I got, I had always seen our early Martins, but then to go and see someone else's collection that they focused on, acquiring a pretty in-depth representation of C.F. Martin Sr.'s early work. And the thing I walked away from that, it was just this, constant reminder to me of like, Chris, your great-great-great-grandfather built a damn fine guitar every time he built a guitar.
Yeah.
And that's what I've always felt is that I think is it. It's like, I think every subsequent generation said, boy, oh boy, that's a high bar. It can be done. We know it can be done because it was done by my father or my father's father or whatever. And our job, as Brian Majeski once said to me, and I will paraphrase this, when we were younger and we're much older now, from Brian from Music Trades said, Chris, what's your job? I said, well, Brian, I think you're about to tell me. And he was much more blunt. He said, don't screw it up.
No pressure. No.
So that's, the context into which I look at my career is the obligation to make sure that we're proud of every guitar we make. And then along the way, and Martin seems to get credit in hindsight for important things rather than in the moment.
Oh.
Other companies, they get this more instantaneous, like, oh, look at what they invented. And with us, maybe it's just because we have been around for so long that over time it's like, that X bracing must work because they're still using it.
For how many years?
That Dreadnought must be a good sounding guitar because they're still making them.
Yeah.
But we don't, and I've kind of come to accept it, that we don't get, like in my career, I think people will look back after I'm retired and go, that thing that Chris was a part of was significant, and I'll take it.
Yeah.
But I am a little jealous of even people I know in this industry that get much more instantaneous credit for doing something cool or creative that we kind of don't.
Well,
but we've done a lot of cool and creative things that over 185 years, people have come to say, yeah, that was significant.
Well, lots of people who do things that get immediate recognition, well, as you and I probably know, a lot of times that fades quickly. And,
right.
So in your case, that has not happened.
And we've had, and throughout the history, things that ultimately failed either quickly or over time. We have an exhibit in the museum now about the durability of the Style 28. And D28. I know D28. Yeah. But before the D28, there were small-bodied guitars in the style of the 28. So here's was an experiment, pretty much a visual experiment. It's like, how do we take this rosewood guitar, give it some ornamentation, not be ostentatious, but have it be accepted and become something that people continue to want to own, and the Style 28 is a good example. But if you go into our history book, you'll go, I wonder what a Style 34 was. Well, it couldn't have been that compelling because we don't make them anymore.
Right. It's an amazing story, and there's lots of very, very interesting information available.
Yes, and lots of publications.
Yeah.
And, we've got books. We're pretty open with our records. The company has good records. The only regret I have is I wish, and I'm guilty, although I get, I'm able to archive my life by doing things like this, We don't have any of that pretty much from the point of earlier generations beyond my grandfather.
Yeah.
You know, there were no diaries. People just weren't as inclined to interview, you know, Mr. Martin 100 years ago as they are more so today.
Well, it probably has something to do with all of the things that we had as kids and teenagers that if we had just hung on to, we would be wealthy. You know?
Yeah, right. Well, and that's the other, you know, the stories I hear, you know, my first Martin, and I'll say, do you still have it? And then they kind of look at their shoes and go, no, I needed rent money. But I wish I still did, you know. Yeah. Once in a while, and this happened to a friend of mine, once in a while, I'll hear a story, and I'll tell the story in the context of my friend, but I also hear it around Martin guitars. We grew up in northern New Jersey, and we both ended up in Boston going to college, but his parents had relocated to Florida, so he was living, you know, off and on with his parents in between stints in college or whatever, and he wanted to be a professional bass player, and he bought our blue Rickenbacker bass, and at some point decided, I'm moving on to Fenders. Time to, you know, go over to Fender basses, and he sold the Rickenbacker bass. And just 2 or 3 years ago, he told me this story very recently. He said, you know, I decided to relive my youth. So I started to scour the internet for a blue Rickenbacker bass, and I found one. And I bought it. Uh-huh. The bass he found was located at a vintage guitar dealer in Florida. The dealer sends him the bass. He opens up the case, and he sees on the case a mark that he had made when he scraped the case against something before he sold it. Oh,
my gosh.
How about that?
Wow.
And I hear those stories about, and then years later, I was reunited with my first Martin. So that's always a fun anecdote. Yeah,
I do. And I do hear some similar stories from time to time from some of the people that we talk to. You know, because we don't have 3 hours here, I'm going to go ahead and...
You can have me back someday.
I hope so, and I can assure you that I'll take you up on that. So now, I kind of want to spend most of the rest of the interview talking about some aspects of the Martin business that I think might be of interest to our listeners, and not really in any particular order. Okay. So, the first thing I want to ask you about is the aged guitars, and I'm really interested out of pure curiosity, but I think it would be interesting to others too, to know what really precipitated that move and if the results have been what you hoped for.
Yeah. So, I a lot of times I end up endorsing things that I was not as intimately involved with as my colleagues were. So I'm going to kind of give you my perspective on this. Mm-hmm. It will not be as specific or factual as it would be if you were interviewing the people that actually did the work.
Yeah, so I'm interviewing you, so that's what I want.
So if you think about what, I'm really proud of the fact that by and large, if you were so inclined, we could make you a pretty good copy of a vintage Martin guitar. Pretty good, and in fact, we've refined that process. We've worked with our vintage partners, our dealers that are vintage dealers, to really hone in on, hey, if you're going to make a reproduction, do it right. Don't do it so-so, and then, we decided to skimp in here. But the one thing we couldn't really say to the customer, and we can make it sound old. That just came with time. Yeah. And then, we became aware we did not invent torrification, nor were we the first people who have used torrification relative to musical instruments.
So can we just, for those who may not be familiar with the term, one definition?
So the best thing would be to Google it. Yeah. It's the scientific term. So it was a process developed by the Vikings.
Oh, wow.
To basically sort of heat wood under a very controlled circumstance. And today you do it in a vacuum kiln as opposed to like a hut. Yeah, right. and you're accelerating the process of extracting the moisture and what happens to wood as that moisture comes out over time. Mm-hmm. That scientific thing that happens, that in the case of guitars or violins, happens to help them sound better.
Yeah.
And so everyone, they kind of anecdotally knew, hey, I guess it might be partially because the wood is old and it's dried out. And it turns out when you look at the cellular structure, particularly of a spruce top, it's like, yeah, that's what had happened over 50 years. And it's probably one of the reasons these things sound so good is the wood has just dried out and the cellular structure has transformed itself. And so we said, let's take a closer look at this torrefication process. Okay. Because we have the ability to make these reproductions, could that benefit could that be part of the secret sauce? And I'm going to tell you, from what my colleagues have told me and from what the partners we work with, it's complicated.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's really easy to throw a piece of wood in a vacuum kiln and turn it on and walk away and open it up the next day and kind of go, huh, so that's what happened. And in fact, and I don't know this for a fact, but I'm hoping that everyone who's doing this, it's not, we are not the only people who are doing it, appreciates how difficult it is to do correctly. Yeah. And in our case, what we have tried to do, and fortunately we have the examples of, hey, we've got guitars in our museum that we can use as reference points. Mm-hmm. We're really attempting to mimic the aging process to bring you back to about 1930 or 1940.
Right.
Because that's where everyone goes, that's it. That's when Martin went with steel strings. They went with the 12-fret neck. They had the dreadnought. That's really when the modern flat-top steel string guitar came into being. So those are the originals. But if you're not careful, you could probably transport that top back into the mid-1800s before you knew what you were doing,
Yeah, sure.
So that's how we're approaching it. I think other people they're just kind of throwing it in the vacuum kiln and crossing their fingers and saying, we torrefied it. Mm-hmm. We're actually attempting to torrefy it within a range of, say, mid-20s to mid-40s. Right. So, well over 30, 40 years ago.
And the process of this is not relicking, we have
to be careful because apparently that's a trademark. But we're aging the guitars also in terms of we'll give it a little politely patina. Mm-hmm. And we're doing a light version. I'm pushing my colleagues to do a heavier version, and they're kind of like, Chris, be careful what you wish for. I'm like, I'm okay with it. But it's a skill that only a couple of us here in Nazareth are even trained to do. It isn't just, you don't just hand someone a nail and say, start scratching up a guitar and, we'll see how it goes. So you have to be careful. But it's, and the advantage, particularly in the United States, you have is you get a guarantee. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You're getting what is essentially a reproduction of a vintage guitar built by the original builder, and you, the new owner, have a guarantee from that builder that you don't get when you buy a used guitar.
That's right. Yeah.
And George Gruen, he said, what's happening now is some people, as they're getting older or their spouses are like, really, another guitar? He said people are beginning now to bring stuff in that they either want to shrink down their collection or they want to trade out and get something else in. And now, because of the internet, they know exactly what the guitar is worth.
Yeah, wow.
Well, George, I bought this for this much 30 years ago, but I've been on the internet and I know they're worth $25,000. And George says, yes, unfortunately, your guitar has the trifecta. And I'll get this wrong, but it's basically, it needs a neck reset. There's an issue with the bridge, and there's something else. And when I get done doing all that work, I will hope to be able to sell it for what you saw the price on the internet. I cannot give you that price, first of all, because I have to pay you wholesale, and I have to subtract out the cost of all those repairs before I pay you any money at all.
Sure. A lot of people don't understand that.
No. Yeah. Particularly if they bought the guitar and then just stored it badly and it deteriorated. And now they're like, oh, but it's 20 years older. Yeah, but you didn't take good care of it.
So the other part of my question, and you can answer it generally if you like, but has this gone over well? Is the market received it well?
Yes, because, we're very conscious of, okay, how do we price these things? Mm-hmm. If they're hard to make, we want to make a profit, and then we look at what do the old ones sell for.
Yeah.
And as long as I think, what's that business term? It's a compelling value proposition. All right, it isn't a 1934 D28, nor is it priced like a 1934 D28, but boy, it sure looks and sounds like one.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay, let's move on to another topic. And I came across on your website And I'm very interested to know something more about the Martin experience. And this seems like something very prominent. And when we talked the other day, you said that this is something that you've occasionally had a personal role in it. So I'd like to hear a little bit about it and then what it's intended to do for the company. And I think there's a lot of elements there.
There's two ways we approach this. One is, and everywhere I go, this is always part of the talk that I give in the music store is, please come and visit. Please come to Nazareth and take the tour, spend an hour in the museum. That way you'll walk away going, I have a clear understanding of the history of this company, and I have a clear understanding of why they're so expensive, because they're damn hard to make. So we've enhanced the visitor experience when you come to the factory. It's like, okay, we got one shot at this. In fact, today we have, I spent an hour or so in the museum with a bunch of, real rabid fans who came here partially to get a tour with me, to get a factory tour, to pick up the guitar that they may have bought through a dealer. So it's like factory fresh. Mm-hmm. In the event that you aren't coming soon, we'll go around the world to meet you. And we partner with a good Martin dealer. They make, they do pre-publicity. And I just did a couple in Canada, and it's like, Mr. Martin's coming to town, and he's bringing a musician, and he's bringing some fancy custom guitars, and it's free.
Wow! Yeah.
Come on and check it out. So I'll give the history talk, and then Craig Thatcher or whoever is the clinician will talk about the new models. Talk a lot today about how the electronics work, because they're pretty sophisticated, and then question and answer, and I'll do autographs. And that's what I do. But if I can't, we'll send out the clinician and one of our field sales reps or someone else from the factory that has the ability to tell the story in a way that keeps the audience, interested. And I over the years, I've gotten half decent at telling the Martin history story.
I can imagine. I mean, you're telling it pretty good here. And I would think after that many years, you'd have a good handle on it. Now, this is certainly good for the dealer, the retailer, wherever you're having it. Yep. So it's bringing people there and hopefully and from the standpoint of you guys, it's pulling business through that, and particularly, and I'm going to, put myself on a little pedestal here. when it's me, the dealer feels like, okay, this is special. Yeah.
That my field sales rep convinced Chris to get up off his ass and get on a plane and fly out here to hang out in my store for an evening. And it is a way for me to say, thank you so much. You're doing exactly what we want Martin dealers to do. You are a shining example of a good Martin dealer, and that's why I'm here.
What kind of attendance do these things? I'm sure it's all over the board, but
it is. If you get 50, because more often than not, the store isn't huge. If you get 50 people that want to be there, I'm happy.
Oh.
When it gets over 100, it gets a little unwieldy.
Yeah, well, the space.
I did one years and years ago. I did one in Florida, and we get there, and there's one guy, but we're early, and there's one guy, and now it's not early at all. And I said to the sales rep, I said, "What's going on?" He goes, "I don't know."
Oh.
Let me go check. So he goes, talks to the music store owner, and this music store's owner there is shaking his head, and Ralph's ringing he's like, "Really?" It turns out, and I won't name names, that 2 weeks before he had another event for another product in the music space, and they just had a couple of heavy hitter musicians that were going to come in, and apparently an hour or two before the event, the musician called from his hotel room and said, I need $500 in cash or I'm not coming over.
Oh, jeez.
And the dealer was so pissed off. He said, I just didn't have the heart to promote So we did a clinic for one person.
Oh, well, it must have been interesting.
And that person was thrilled.
Yeah, well, very special, I'm sure. Well, I think we'll keep an eye on that. There's certainly a lot of events scheduled that I saw on the website. So, looks like you're going pretty strong with it.
And we're open, weekdays. We give tours from mid-morning to mid-afternoon, and the museum's always open whenever the factory's open.
Yeah, cool.
And of course, we have a gift shop.
I'm sure that's very nice. I want to talk a little bit about NAMM. You're a NAMM board member, and I think most of us would agree that NAMM has always been one of the most important institutions in the music business.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you could give us your sense of where the organization is now and where it may be going in the future, and you can run with that any way you want.
Sure. So I've been going to NAMM shows for a long time. Mm-hmm. They used to be in Chicago. That was
I remember. I was there.
NAMM's headquarters was in Chicago. The show was at McCormick Place. And then it started over time, it got a little stale. But at some point, NAMM said, let's try an experiment. Let's try to do another show. We'll just do bare bones, basic, and we'll pick a different time of the year. Let's pick right after Christmas because the dealers are flush. They got money in their pocket if they had a good Christmas. And let's pick somewhere where the weather's nice. Mm-hmm. I happen to be living in Los Angeles, going to UCLA, working at Westwood Music. And my dad, we were talking on the phone, and he said, hey, if you get a chance, can you go down to the airport this weekend and check out the NAMM show? I said, yeah, I could do that. So sure enough, in one or more hotels right by LAX was the first winter NAMM show that I attended, kind of unbeknownst to me. You know, given now here I am many years later, part of the NAMM organization as a board member. Right. And then it was like, people liked it. They liked the fact that the weather was nice. They liked the fact that they had money in their pocket. Maybe we can do something with this. So they moved down to Anaheim and put it in the Disneyland Hotel. I remember that too. I think we exhibited one time in the parking garage in the early days. Yeah, they used the parking garage. It overflowed the Disney exhibit space. Yeah. And then Anaheim said, we're building a convention center. And NAMM was like, we will be there. And in fact, my understanding is right now the NAMM show is the largest convention in even the new expanded Anaheim convention space. What has happened, interestingly, in the meantime, is when I was younger, there were trade shows all over the world. And not just Frankfurt. I mean, Frankfurt was the big one. Frankfurt was bigger than NAMM. But there was a show in Paris, and there was a show in Amsterdam, and there was a show in Buenos Aires, and there was a show in Montreal, and there was a show in Perth. And those, by and large, they're all gone. And what NAMM has been very astute to do, give a lot of credit to Joe Lamont and his leadership, is to continue to keep that show relevant. And more recently, by partnering with people that have been peripherally involved, but it was not their primary venue because their primary shows are struggling. So now we've partnered with people more formally who do lighting. We've partnered more formally with people that do stage setups. And Joe said, now we're getting customers who may be looking for a PA system for Legoland. Yeah. Wow. Sure. Makes sense. And those people are like, this is a dynamic show. It's well located for anyone in the audio business. And it helped us fill out that new building that the Anaheim Convention Center built. And we offer the other thing is NAMM's cheap. People go, that's $135. You come to a NAMM show, the education is free. When you talk to people who belong to professional associations, they'll say, yeah, I can join the association for $100. But if I want to go to a seminar to get education, that's $500. That stuff from NAMM's free. Yeah. That's part of the deal is for $130 some, you get a free education on how to run a music store, how to run a music store better, how to keep your music store in your family business or in your family. It's the value is extraordinary. It really is. And I'm really proud. I'm chairman right now of the NAMM Foundation, which has been in existence for a while. That's what funds all the educational work we do. Sure. Right. And about a year or two ago, our attorney said, NAMM is in and of itself a nonprofit. We recommend you spin the foundation off of NAMM so that they don't look like they're commingling. And not that we were, but they said you're both getting big enough now that they need to be separate. And so we created new bylaws that say that the the vice chairman of NAMM, which is my formal title now, is also the chairman of the NAMM Foundation.
Oh,
I'll roll into being chairman of NAMM next summer. I'm following
is
the
that right?
footsteps of Robin Walenta from West Music, who's been a great mentor of mine. Right. And prior to that, Larry Morton. It's interesting, for most of its history, NAMM was run by the retailers because it was begun by retailers.
Sure. That's right.
And those of us on the commercial side kept arguing, but who's paying the rent here? Well, you are with your booth space. So can we have a seat at the table? So now the NAMM chairmanship alternates between what's known as a commercial member, someone like me, or a retail member, someone like Robin Walenta, or following behind me, Joel Menchie from Menchie Music.
What's the term of that, Chris?
Well, that's an interesting story in and of itself. So I was on the NAMM board years ago, 3 years. Had fun, got invited back to participate in some deep discussions about the NAMM charter, and felt very proud of that. I was involved in the origination of the NAMM museum when that happened. And then about 6.5, 7 years ago, Larry Morton just comes up to me at a trade show and he goes, "So we had a meeting, and your name came up." I said, "Oh, really? In what context?" "We would like you to join the NAMM Executive Committee Board." I said, "Oh, really? What's that like?" He said, "Oh, it's a lot of fun." I said, "Oh, how long?" "Oh, it's only 8 years." So I'm 6 years into six and change into an 8-year commitment, and it's a riot. But every now and then my wife says, "I wish you had asked a few more questions."
The chairman,
about what this 8-year commitment looks like.
The chairman role, is that just a 1-year thing, or
that's 2 years? Yeah,
okay. So you'll finish off. You'll finish off as chairman, right?
What you do then is you kind of lock arms with Joe Lamont, and you are everywhere you can be at the NAMM show. You go travel to Frankfurt. You go see big exhibitors. Joe and I will go to Japan at some point and just do courtesy calls on folks like Yamaha to thank them for their business, and it's fun.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Well, it's that's quite a role, and I'm really glad that you could share that with us. And I'm not sure how many people know that about you, but they do.
So I have to tell you a funny story.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the coolest things that I get to do now is, I think, is it Wednesday night or Thursday night of the NAMM show? They have the new member reception. So if it's your first NAMM show, you get invited to this little mixer.
Right.
And so I go and I work the room, and people, they don't know who I am. And I'm like, why are you here? And they're so excited. They're just so and they've got some gizmo that they invented that they want to commercialize, or they're opening a music store. And then at some point they'll look at my badge and they'll go Martin, like Martin guitar.
The light goes off.
And I'm like, yeah. And I think they're like, geez, not only did I get to come to my first NAMM show, I got to meet someone who's kind of famous. And I'm sitting there going, I am inspired by your enthusiasm. You are so excited to be here. It makes me excited to be here, even though I've been doing this for 50 years.
Yeah, nice. Great story. So let's talk now about wood, Chris.
All right.
I know that's a topic. It's a big topic, and I'm sure clearly this is something that you've been deeply involved in, and for good reason. So maybe the simplest question might be, what is the state of wood from your perspective?
I think the good news is that there is more realization of the value of all of these rare exotic timbers than there's ever been. The reality is that there is not as much of them as there used to be, but there is a concerted effort by and large to be much more judicious with the resource than there's ever been, because of the knowledge that it is finite. Mm-hmm. And if we don't take care of it, we're all going to be crying in our beer. Yeah. There's still illegal logging going on. I don't think much, I'm not going to say it doesn't happen. I think most of that is to fuel other industries. I don't think a lot of that illegally logged wood is being used to make musical instruments. But we do know, in particular, given the most recent CITES regulations around rosewood, that a particular type of rosewood that is not really the type that guitar builders use is being used indiscriminately to make reproduction Chinese antique furniture. Mm. And that's the reason that CITES said, we've got to do something about this. This is a problem. And if we don't act, that particular species of tree will go away. It'll just disappear. We got kind of caught up in that. And then even the CITES people were like, uh-oh, we didn't really mean, it's like the tuna fishermen who catch the dolphin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we didn't really mean to do that, but we kind of did, didn't we? So we're actually now in the process of negotiating with CITES to try and get them to consider an exemption for musical instruments. So because what's the tedium of the paperwork is the problem, and a lot of smaller companies, I think, have just given up. I'm very fortunate. I have a robust back office, and they can do it. It's tedious, it's time consuming, but smaller companies are like, this is just crazy. I'm not even going to export. I can't even deal. I don't have the resources to deal with this bureaucracy that's been created around just getting a piece of rosewood across a border.
And then, like you said, the MI use of it is not really the problem, is it?
I think, by and large, could be used as an example of the solution. I wish CITES had come to us and said, can we use you as an industry to show the rest of the world how to take better care of these resources? But it's a big, cumbersome organization. And for example, Greenpeace used us as an example in a documentary of how, and we were not as successful as we had hoped to be, how can we convince the Native Alaskans to take better care of spruce? And do we need to continue to clear cut? And I think it was a very complicated question. And ultimately, the Native Alaskans said, until we get more spruce from the U.S. government, we need to keep clear cutting to generate the revenue to support our native population. But the Greenpeace knew. They said, look, if we get guitar builders and guitar players to participate in this documentary, people will watch it. And so that, from that standpoint, and it was, a bunch of us, Taylor was involved and Gibson, Martin, and a few others. We were all, willing. And certainly it's like, yes, we want to tell this story. We want to work on treating this stuff with respect. I jokingly say to people, I don't want my 14-year-old daughter, when she's 28, to be walking around a NAMM show saying, well, we had to close the family business because Daddy cut down the last rosewood tree.
Yeah. Well, do you feel like it's moving in the right direction, not moving wrong direction?
Oh, it's definitely. Other than where it's still a challenge is when you get in country, and it's a country that could really use the revenue. And a great example is Madagascar. Madagascar has abject poverty. It's a beautiful place. I've never been, but everyone who said it's just spectacularly beautiful. And they have two things that they could use to their economic advantage that I think could be complementary. One is ecotourism, and the other is judicious legal logging of rare exotic timbers that grow prolifically in Madagascar. Unfortunately, the world community has said, we don't trust the government.
Oh.
And because we don't trust the government, we are recommending no one buy wood from Madagascar. So guess what's happening? Wood is being sold from Madagascar illegally because those people don't care. And those of us that do care are being told not to buy it. And it's like, this is kind of ass backwards here.
It is.
I'm willing to help create economic value. I'm willing to help to fund, to teach folks how to take care of these resources. But my colleagues they said, Chris, there's so much poverty. They're cutting down the exotic timber and using it for firewood because they have to cook dinner. They have to cook dinner. So and they said they don't even know how to get the logs out of the jungle. But it's like Madagascar could really, it could be turned around. I'm not sure how, but it's broken. They've got this timber. Those of us that do it the right way are being told not to buy from Madagascar, and the wood's being cut down left and right and leaving at night to go God knows where to make God knows what.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we're certainly going to keep an eye on it, and I'm sure you are.
It's worth watching. It's an opportunity for a success story. Everyone tells me it's so complicated they don't even know where to begin. But so guess what? We don't begin.
Yeah, that's it. That's it always. Let's change gears again here. We talked the other day a little bit about competition, and you have some interesting thoughts on that. So I'm kind of wondering from your vantage point, How does Martin deal with competition? What's your underlying view?
There again, in doing research over the years on my family's business and the market dynamics, apparently back in the 1800s, there was a gentleman named Mr. Ashbourne. And Mr. Ashbourne was a industrialist and had an interest in guitar building, and set up a factory in the Connecticut River Valley where there was a lot of industry. I mean, that's guns were coming out of there, and clocks and furniture, and they had power. They had water power and things like that. And his story that he would tell, he would go into a music store that he thought he could generate some business from, and say, I'm a competitor of Mr. Martin's. Oh, great. And I see you sell Martin guitars. I have a better value proposition for you. What is that? I can make a pretty good guitar. It's going to kind of sort of look like a Martin. It's not quite as much money. It's not quite the same quality. And I'll put your name on it. So you can name it after your family or your music store. Oh, really? How many models do you have? I got like three. Three? How many? Well, like how many different necks? I got one neck. Yeah. One neck. Yep. And 3 different body sizes. Yep. That's why they're so cheap. I don't have a lot of variety, and I need a big order so I can fire up the factory. Are you in? And people are like, yeah, what the hell? I'll give it a whirl. So that was my family's first exposure to competition outside of someone building a couple of guitars in his garage. This guy fires up a factory and decides to compete with us. We outlived him. They go over the years back in the 20s and 30s when musicians were transitioning from the banjo and the mandolin over to embracing the guitar. Well, we were ready. Well, guess what? When some other folks are like, the demand for guitars is going up, we should get into that business too. So then you've got Gibson. And we have a model in our line, I jokingly like to say, it's a Martin copy of a Gibson copy of a Martin.
That's funny.
And then when I think about my dad, he had Guild guitars. Back then, Guild they were formidable. And then, shortly thereafter, Ovation. And Ovation had compelling technology. Charlie Command had the resources to promote his brand. Then you talk about the Asians. And, initially Asian guitars were terrible. And they didn't give up.
No.
And over time, people collect old Japanese guitars now. Because they were, there was a sweet spot there before they became too expensive to make. But after they figured out how to make them well, that the Japanese were making really good copies of American guitars. And in their own right, they still have, a reason to exist. And of course, today, in my case, primarily Bob Taylor, although you look at a lot of the luthiers, ex-hippies or whatever that got into the business and grew out of their garage. There's a bunch of them.
I know. I've interviewed some of them.
Yeah. Dana Bourgeois, Bill Collings, Richard Hoover. And then you get Tom Bedell, who comes back into the business.
Had both those guys. Interesting.
Yeah. So it's I talked about this the other day. I told you the book I read that was talking about market dynamics and how in the beginning there's hundreds of competitors, and they said, it's okay if you get down to 2 formidable competitors, particularly if one of them is you. Yeah. But the book said what you don't want to be is the only person doing the thing you're doing. That usually means it's too late and you should have sold the business.
Oh, yeah.
So right now we have at least one really formidable competitor, thank you, Bob, and a whole bunch of, not... When you add them all up, in between America and Canada and Europe and Australia and Asia, the number of people making acoustic guitars around the world is kind of astounding, really. Oh, particularly when I go to the Shanghai trade show, and initially I remember it had been a while since I was there. I was just there last month. Some of these Asian shops, you can tell that the people that are running them are more into guitar building than running a business, because they're doing some really creative stuff. And you can just see that their creative juices are like, oh, no, I've got to stop making copies of Martins and start doing my own thing. And I'm like, that's cool.
Yeah.
You're a guitar builder, you're not just copying me. You're you're going out on a limb going, I'm just doing this because I think it's cool.
Well, it's really the last 10 years. I started in this business at the end of the 70s, but I came and wandered off a little bit here and there, but I came back into it around 2007 or so and started working with what was then a decent number of smaller boutique builders.
Okay.
And, the landscape was kind of interesting. But if I fast forward today and you look at the growth of all around the world, in that sort of genre, I mean, it's just staggering.
Yeah. Now, one thing I ponder, and then I'll get to some really good news, but I do wonder, what is the landscape going to look like when all of us, and I'm going to put myself in a separate category because I think, the Martin legacy has the ability to endure with or without me. But I wonder about all these other companies that were founded by people my age.
Yeah.
Who, particularly if their children have no interest. What's going to happen? We're all in our 60s. Some of us are in our 70s. What's going to happen to all those little, some medium sized, one or two big companies when the founder's not into it anymore? So that's just something to at least watch. The good news is, how about the ukulele?
Yeah,
Who
how
would have
about
thought?
that? Who
would have thought? And even when it was happening, I would say people have stopped. They've just kind of given up. But for the past 10 years, at the next NAMM show, everyone would go, "This has got to end. This can't keep going like this." And then the next year later, like, "Oh my God, there's more of them." The cool thing is, and I'm working on a little thing for Music Trades about this. Let's give a shout out to all of those little boutique stores that aren't music stores but are selling ukuleles.
That's interesting.
I know, and I'm the first one to say go to a music store, but I'll tell you what, if you want a ukulele, just grab the first one you see when you're on vacation at that little gift shop and have fun.
Yeah.
And if you stick with it, you're going to end up at a music store.
I have a number of friends that have just sort of taken it up because it's a little easier to play, I guess, for them.
Yep.
But,
It's fun. There's so much stuff on YouTube, that's free. And my daughter, Diane, got her into the piano. She learned how to read music. She got in a little band ensemble with the flute. But you could tell it was sort of like, yeah, I'm doing it because Mom and Dad want me to. And a couple of months ago, she goes, "Dad, where's that ukulele?" I said, "It's up in the closet somewhere." She comes down, she goes, "It's broken." And I looked at it, and the one string had slipped off of the nut. So I did some heroic repair work by pushing the string back into the nut slot. And I said, "It's fixed." She's up in her bedroom playing the ukulele on her own.
Wow.
That's when you know someone's into music. Not because Mom told you to go practice, but it's because, no, I'm just doing it because it's fun and I want to do it.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
One other thing, there's been a lot of rumblings from some big retailers about direct sales from manufacturers.
Yeah.
I've been seeing this, bubbling up, and I just want to know from your perspective, how big of a controversy is this, and what thoughts do you have on it, if any?
Yeah, I do. I have thoughts. I have to, at this point, I'm going to put my NAMM board member hat on and say that I'm going to keep those thoughts to myself. Yeah. All right?
Yeah, no.
It's controversial enough that I would prefer not to be quoted on that one.
Got it. Well, respected 100%. So let's just move away from that, and we'll see how that just evolves, and I'm sure we'll be able to.
Yes, it's worth watching.
Yeah. Well, look, finally, I always kind of end the show with something a little bit more perspective oriented, but I was hoping maybe I could just get an overview from you about the future of the business, both from an industry viewpoint and then also from Martin specifically. And it's kind of open-ended.
Sure. Well, let's start with Martin. I have gone on record. I've, particularly I talked about this odyssey I've been on with NAMM and the executive board, that I realized, the next move when I become chairman is going to be challenging for me, travel-wise and all. And then I thought, okay, and then I get done with that, and I get to come back to work full-time, and I'll be 65 years old. And I said, this is the perfect opportunity for me to say, when I am done with my commitment to NAMM, I will be retiring as chairman and CEO of Martin.
Wow.
However, then I said, no, wait, whoa, why would I do that?
I thought we were going to have a big announcement.
Well, but what I will be doing is passing on the title of CEO.
Okay. All right.
It's like, I think I would be crazy. I think the company would be crazy to not keep me on as Mr. Martin.
Right.
Roll me out at a trade show, send me down to the museum to give a tour, do an interview, and it'll keep me relevant. But I am not going to have it in me to come back after that NAMM chairmanship and be the CEO for the future of the company. I will remain the majority owner with my wife and my daughter. And so that's my challenge. And I'm working with Jackie Renner, who's the president of the company, in some sort of a transition that it'll be different. But I think I'm ready, and I needed to say it sooner rather than later so that the company can prepare for it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. As far as the industry goes, I think in the short term, I think the challenge is going to be, other than the professional that feels it's necessary to buy a new musical instrument, will the economic circumstances support the robust consumerism that we are enjoying now from the hobbyists? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That, other than if you're a professional, and if you're a professional, you probably already have a good musical instrument. Nobody needs another guitar. But there's a lot of people that want another guitar, and particularly when they feel comfortable spending that kind of money on what is essentially a toy, all of us benefit.
Yeah.
And we all feel good, and we're all rocking and rolling, and we're on overtime, and we're buying more wood. But when that merry-go-round stops, it's challenging. And my family has been through several of those, and none of them are fun. No. And I just get a sneaking suspicion there's one lurking around the corner somewhere.
You're probably not alone in that.
Yeah. In that, I mean, you don't necessarily want to plan for it, but you have to be ready to implement a plan in the event that it happens. The other thing is the challenge, and I saw this in Canada. The punchline there was, if your father or mother or grandfather or grandmother had the foresight to buy the real estate that the family music store was located in, you're in a good place.
Yeah.
Particularly given how real estate has gone up so much in value. If you're renting, it's really challenging because the landlord is looking at your building saying, I can get more rent for that building. And if I can't get it from you, I can get it from someone else. Sure. So either pay up or get out of the way. Mm. And I think, let's not even talk about e-commerce, because I think an astute independent retailer can use e-commerce to their advantage. But if you can't afford to pay the rent, that's tough.
Yeah. That's going to make a difference.
Yeah. And most of us are in this for our heart before our wallet. I mean, the wallet always helps, but this is an industry that just oozes passion. And so the money is sort of like, it's the after effect of doing something that you love to do. But if you can't afford to do it, then all of a sudden your passion gets, I think, a little bit dampened. And
in terms of the plus side there, I mean, what do those people do?
Well, the benefit to me personally of my NAMM exposure is to broaden my perspective of what goes on at NAMM, what goes on at the show. And we've got, in the summer, we've got the top 100 dealer awards. Mm-hmm. And then out of that top 100, there's an independent group that specially selects people that really are shining examples of what, how can a store be compelling in terms of what does it look like? How can a store be compelling in terms of what kind of events do they do to attract new people? And that's where you see people that they are not giving up. They understand it's challenging. They understand that the music store they ran yesterday probably isn't going to be the same as the store they're going to run tomorrow. And they're inventing the store they're going to run tomorrow, hoping it's going to work. And that's really inspiring to see people going, I'm not giving up. Well, I'm not giving up without a fight.
It's going to be interesting to watch. We're kind of at the end here, and I'm just so thrilled to have you on the show. And this is
fun.
It's just been very, very interesting. I know, and you're right. We're going to have to do this again down the road for part 2.
Yeah, wait a year or two.
Right. When you're in the throes.
Check with me when I'm retired.
Yeah, maybe so.
I'll have a little more time.
Maybe so. But again, I want to thank you for taking the time to come on, and I'm sure that everybody's going to really enjoy it.
Great. Thanks so much. Take care.
So what did you think of the interview with Chris Martin? We always want to hear from you, and you can do that easily through the contact page on our website at guitarbusinessradio.com or on our Facebook and Twitter pages at Guitar Business, or email us directly at contact@guitarbusinessradio.com. And naturally, if none of that works for you, just call us on our GBR hotline at 888-777-2404. You can do that right now if you like, or later. So I have to admit, in my long and lengthy career as a non-working guitar player, I've never been much of an acoustic guy. In fact, I think I've owned like one acoustic guitar in my life, and I haven't seen that one in 30 years or maybe more. But I may be changing my tune in 2019. We'll see. I say that because as primarily an electric guitar player, my interest in acoustic brands was peripheral at best. I certainly knew of Martin guitars growing up and later in life, but could probably only tell you that there was an 18, a 28, a 35, and that was about it. Now, I've worked with a number of acoustic builders in the last dozen years or so, and my general knowledge from the business perspective has grown substantially. But my depth of understanding about the Martin brand, let alone the business side, had not really increased all that much. So obviously this has now changed dramatically for me, personally. In order to do the interview properly, I had to devote quite a few hours to learning all I could about C.F. Martin and Company, from both the historical and business perspective. And with 185 years of history, well, let's just say there's a lot there. And while that was all extremely interesting, I have to say I was completely blown away by the size and depth of the Martin catalog today. And I was kind of surprised that I had missed this over all these years. I mean, I knew the basics, but had no idea what was really there. So I'm kind of sheepish about admitting this lack on my part because, after all, I should know this, I'm thinking to myself. I mean, I started in this business like 40 years ago, at a very young age, I might add. But the truth is, none of us knows everything. Even people who I think are much smarter than me, and I'm sure there are many, they don't know everything. And that's why we must absolutely keep up our interest and energy to learn every day. I'm amazed at all the new things I learn each and every 24-hour segment, just to vary the terminology a bit. But it's something we need to be conscious of. We have to be open to it and recognize it when we see it. Most of us don't. We just take it for granted and don't realize how much new material we take in all the time. I guarantee, if you could make a list of all the new things you learn each day, or just for one day, you would be amazed. I've found that the more you know that you are learning, the more enthusiastic you are about learning more. And I can tell you that doing the prep for this interview and doing the interview with Chris was an extraordinary learning experience for me. I guess you could call it a Martin experience. And by the way, speaking of learning something new, we've just published 18 new articles on a lot of the stuff you hear me talk about here on a regular basis. And these articles are very short and to the point, and are available free of cost to you on a new editorial platform called GPR Strategies. They're attached to our Guitar PR website, and you can get this useful information at strategies.guitarpr.com, or just visit the guitarpr.com website and click on Strategies. And while you're pondering your next move on that, don't forget to stay positive, stay focused on the destination, but keep all your options open on how you're going to get there. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you again on episode 44. And that's it for this episode of Guitar Business Radio. Thanks for being with us. You can stay tuned and stay in touch at guitarbusinessradio.com.